Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robert Hawkins. I am bringing to order the Committee of Economic Development and Environment. It's changed its name a couple times. To order, we have a committee hearing with Lithium, or Loyal Lithium. So I'll begin by the opening remarks, then we'll introduce our members, and then I'll proceed over to our witness and certainly our guests online. So as a reminder, folks, we are live, and we will need our witnesses, including our guests, etc., to wait till the camera comes on and certainly the microphone come on before we speak. So today, committee will receive a briefing from Loyal Lithium regarding lithium mining in the Northwest Territories. Please note that this meeting is being streamed live streamed through the Assembly's social media channel and on the Legislative Assembly TV network. I will now ask members to introduce themselves for the record, so feel free to introduce your name and your writing, and then I'll proceed to the next phase of my remarks. And I will start at my very far left, and we'll work our way around. If you could start introducing yourself, and we'll work our way around the
table. Good afternoon. My name is George Nearsu. I'm the MLA for the Mackenzie Delta riding.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danny McNeely, and I'm the MLA representative for the Central Mackenzie Valley, the Sahtu region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Julian Morse. I represent Frame Lake Riding in Yellowknife.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Kate Reed. I represent the Great Slave Riding here in Yellowknife as well. Good afternoon, everyone, and I suppose good morning in Australia. I'm Shauna Morgan. I'm the representative for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, everyone. And again, I'm Robert Hawkins, Chair of the committee, and of course, I'm the MLA for Yellowknife Centre. So I'd like to remind all members and witnesses, of course, to direct all questions and comments to myself as your chair and to wait to be recognized before speaking. That'll help us through the recording process to make sure it flows much smoother. I'll now pass the microphone over to our witnesses at Loyal Lithium to introduce themselves and proceed with their presentation. So do we start, should I point to who first? Or
I'll go first, if you like.
Very good.
Good afternoon, and thank you. Yes, good morning from me in Australia. My name is Adam Ritchie. I'm the Managing Director of Loyal Lithium, and I have with me my General Manager, Dan Campbell. This wave.
Hello, thank you for your time. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much, both. Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Eileen Marlew. I'm the manager for Land and Community for Loyal Lithium. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Ms. Marlew. Okay, thank you, everyone. Now I'll ask our members, before we begin, do we have any questions, or shall we just pass straight over to the guests for the presentation? Any questions before we proceed? Seeing any, and I believe it's been communicated. We were hoping to keep the presentation in the 60-minute range at most, so 20 minutes for the presentation and the conversation, if needed, to another 40 minutes in that 60-minute range. Okay. Ms. Marlew, I believe you're leading us through, or Mr. Ritchie? Oh, sorry, Mr. Ritchie, my apologies. Please.
I'll be going for it. Thank you very much, and thanks for bringing up the presentation. It's a privilege to be presenting to you. My presentation is actually a mix of a little bit of promotions to tell you about our project, but there's also some good education, some information about the broader lithium market that I thought could be valuable. Next, please. Basic disclaimer here, please. Next slide. So I thought oh, no, you do not have the latest pack. But anyway, definitely want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, Chief Dry Geese's land and the Acacia region. Maybe go to the next slide. There is some extra slides at the back of this pack that have changed a little bit that I think might be prudent, so we'll work out how we can get to those. But a little bit about myself. As I said, my name is Adam Ritchie. I'm the Managing Director. I have a background in lithium, which is actually quite rare. I've been in the lithium industry since 2018, but my background is building mines. I've been building mines all my life, over 20 years in Western Australia predominantly. major iron ore development over here with Fortescue Industries, and since 2018 been working with the largest independent spodumene producer in the world called Pilbara Minerals. It's a West Australian company, produces 8% of the world's supply of lithium. And my role there was the project director. I was pretty much tasked to expand the plant, but there was some technical issues. And we ended up going deep into the operations and bringing the current plant to nameplate and designing a new pathway for the development, which actually got me very, very intimate with spodumene, and my passion for it grew from there. And hence, we started a company called Lithium, which is very much focused in the North American lithium market. Next, please. And the North American market, in our opinion, is very underdeveloped. We're passionate about the lithium-ion battery. We think it's changing the way we live. If you're not aware, in 2019, the lithium-ion battery actually won a Nobel Prize for its potential impact on humanity. It's really changing the way or pretty much the communication sectors with the mobile phones, the transportation industry with EVs, and then also the energy storage. So we think it's pretty important. It's not going anywhere, and the market that sits below us or around us in Northwest Territories is quite large. It's a third of the consumers in the world. There's 400 million registered vehicles that a large portion of them will change. And there are three main ways to get lithium, be it from a brine, a soft rock or a clay, and then there's the hard rock, which is pretty much dominated by spodumene. And that's what I want to let everybody be aware of, is that spodumene, in my opinion, is the king of the natural resources when it comes to lithium, and Yellowknife has a lot of it. And that's the big opportunity here. Next, please. So we're building a passionate team across Australia and also in country in Canada. We've got Eileen with us today, and Dan. We also have a commercial manager on the West Coast as well. So yeah, we're very much pushing forward with our mission to be a part of this emerging lithium industry. Next, please. But today we're going to focus on the project we have in the Yellowknife, outside of Yellowknife, the Northwest Territories. It's called the Hidden Lake Project. Next. So it's a short drive outside of Yellowknife. It's about 65 k's along the Ingham Trail, right before it transitions to the ice road. You can see on that map there, we have 6 contiguous claims, and there is some prominent spodumene. We're just south of Lift Power, which is another prominent lithium explorer in the region, and we cross over the highway, so right on the highway. So there's lots of the positives about its location, and although we're in the north, it's still very accessible to infrastructure. We're doing this under a joint venture with a company called Patriot Battery Metals, who's predominantly focused in Quebec, and they're one of the largest lithium explorers in Canada at the moment. Next, please. So this project is historical. It's been around since 2016. And we love it because there has been some work already done on it. There was some early field exploration, and then there was some drilling, and then we've even done some met test work. So we acquired this project last year, and we have since in the summer been able to expand its prospectivity when there's 3.25 kilometres of outcropping spodumene. Next, please. And what that actually looks like, if you can get on Google Maps and actually zoom in, and you can see these white strips coming out of the crust, and that's what we've expanded. So these things are quite prominent, and when you add them up, we're quite confident that there's going to be a potential sizable resource here. And if you go to the next slide, please. Because a lot of it outcrops, we believe there's a number of solutions to mining it, whether it be at surface or underground. So we also think it's mineable. Next. As I said, there was some historical work done on this. They've actually taken some of the rock chips and the core, and they've gone through the basic process to understand what's in it and how it processes. And the answer is it processes really well. And we're currently doing further works on that to kind of expand our understanding of the metallurgy. And we're waiting on results at the moment, but the people that have done the test actually classified in the top quartile in terms of quality spodumene in the world. Next, please. And as I mentioned, it's on infrastructure, the Ingram Highway and then outside Yellowknife, and then only 400 or 500 Ks around to Hay River, where there is a rail terminal down there. We can enter into any part of North America or any port. Next, please. So we've been working hard, focused on firstly land and community, and then also been getting out in the field and doing some exploration. We now have our drill permit in hand, and yeah, we're also cracking into some early studies to understand what mining could look like and the test work and how the rocks process. We summarise this in saying that the project's got great resource potential. We believe it's mineable, processable, and it's on infrastructure. So we've been building a team around it and working with the government and the community so they can understand the potential here. And we believe the market will come along and support us in that process. Next, please. So these are kind of where the slides. Is there any chance we can change to my slide deck, or is that not possible? I assume it's not. So let's kick on. So what I outlined here.
Just to interrupt.
Go back, please.
No, if you could go back one. Just to interrupt briefly, sir. Have you sent your slide package?
No, I haven't. I didn't realise another one has been sent.
Okay, sorry. I'm getting a no from Ms. Marlowe. So okay.
That's
So
fine.
currently this is what we have. We do not, if I understand it correctly, have the updated one, or this is the most recent one / only one we have. Okay.
No problem. I'll kick on. So this slide here is just to give a bit of an idea of the typical timeframes to actually execute a project. And the important part about it is that we're very much in this readiness period, where we're doing pretty much the top 4 dot points there. So there's still a lot to go. Yes, we're engaging. Yes, we're doing some exploration work, test work, and kicking off some studies. But there's a whole bunch more that needs to go on. Now, 3 to 5 years, that's ideal. The reality is the time frame for this period is really unknown. It's defined by a lot of things, be it the market conditions and the want for some of these resources to come online. But once we get past this readiness period, then the machine's in motion, as in we start constructing. We want to get it constructed, commissioned, completed, and then into operations. And as we move through this, the social and economic benefits really start to increase. And also the Indigenous opportunities increase as well. I've used some graphics down the bottom just to say, it's very much conceptual on the left. The plant that we're looking at constructing at this stage is very modular. It's not a large plant. And even the pits themselves are not going to be very large. They're more like a quarry size mine if they're going to eventuate. And then ultimately you get to an operation. I've used Dieback as an example of a long-term operation in the region. So my point here is that the readiness period, yes, typically 3 to 5 years, but it could take a lot longer. And there's an ability to shorten that as well when we work collaboratively locally as a community and government and a company. Then the next slide I was going to go on to, and I'll verbalise its input. The input here is a little bit about the lithium supply chain. It's not typical like a gold or a copper, where essentially you get the mineral out and it goes to a next processing stage, and it's very common what happens there. There is a refining process that goes between what we do as a mine, which is actually digging it up and concentrating the spodumene mineral, and we actually have to refine it, where we actually change its form and prepare it for a battery. And the build out of that next step refinery is a very important part of building out the mining portion of the Canadian lithium opportunity, or the North American lithium opportunity. And it's actually probably the larger piece. And so my point here is that for a regional hub to kick off with spodumene or lithium, we really need a critical mass of rocks in the ground that can give confidence to a downstream supplier to actually build out the next step, which is the refining process. So working collaboratively to work out how we can put the Northwest Territories or Yellowknife Lithium on the map in terms of its scale is really important. They need to have confidence to build out the next process. Now, where that refinery goes can be anywhere, but it can be, it's one of the advantages is it's disconnected from a mine. It doesn't have to be on a mine. It can be down south somewhere. It could actually be in another country, but preferably not. So that was the next slide. And one important factor is that the capital intensity of building out mines to supply a refinery has a capital figure, but it's at least double or more to actually build out a refinery. So it's doing a mining concentration is only one small part of the puzzle. This slide here is essentially me talking on a macro level. I believe that putting Yellowknife or the NWT lithium on the map is quite urgent. You know, I believe in lithium. We think it's a sustainable solution going forward, and the world needs lithium, and spodumene is the best place to get this from. Yellowknife has plenty of spodumene, some of which, like our project, is on infrastructure and can happen quite quickly. And the urgency is that there are other forms of lithium. Lithium is quite abundant, and lithium can come from these other sources. And they're around the world, they're progressing all these other sources of lithium. And even over on the other side of Canada, in Quebec, they're quite well advanced in terms of bringing some of these resources on. So if we can't, what I think is really important is for us to get Northwest Territory on the map in terms of we have spodumene, we have a sizable amount of spodumene, we have a solution to market, and whether we demonstrate it or we work together to promote that, I think is really urgent. Because otherwise it will go to other provinces, other countries, and then once those big projects are funded and the refineries are built in connection, then the opportunity starts to reduce. So that's my point on a macro. And just to give you a little bit of a touch about the differences even that I see in Canada, we have another project over in Quebec, but the region in Quebec is already established 450 million tonnes of spodumene in the ground defined. Today, we don't have any in Northwest Territories. LIFT is doing a fantastic job in being the first to define how much they have. We would like to be straight there behind them to define how much we have as well. But they've already hit that critical mass. So there's lots of attention over there, and we need to kind of get that back to the West Coast or the Northwest Territories. And that was pretty much my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. It appears we now have the updated slide presentation. We have a little bit of time left on the presentation side of it before we go to questions. Would you like us to put the presentation on the screen so you can refer to the missing or adjusted slides?
If you don't mind, if you can just go to slide the last couple, just so I can reiterate the importance of the flow there, so that you can reference them later if you need to. Just slides 14 and 15.
We're just doing that now. If you give us 1 second.
Excellent, thank you. If you just flick to the one before, please. Yeah, so that was me just saying that we're very much in that readiness, and really this is the support that we would need from community and government, is trying to make that readiness period as short as possible, so we can move into almost the defined timelines of construction completion. And next one, please. And this slide here was very much us saying that there is clearly mining, refining, and then cathode creation. The one that we're talking about today in the Northwest Territory is very much on the left-hand side. The mining and the concentration is a very small part of the overall creation of a lithium hydroxide product. It's a technical mineral that we have in the ground, and it takes test work, and there's a lot of risk in building these concentrators, or they're a lot simpler than the next process, which is a refinery, where they have to go through extensive qualification processes in order to make sure the purity of the lithium is high, and therefore there is no complications with batteries as they get made. But there's some metrics down the bottom left-hand corner about a district scale targets that we should strive for, and that's having a spodumene resource in the Northwest Territories greater than 100 million tonnes. Now, that doesn't have to come from one person, although LIFT are going to go pretty close. But it's a combination of accessible resources defined in the region. And then from that 100 million, people can get confidence of building larger infrastructure that connects to it. And I have a vision of that building out somewhere on the west coast of Canada. It could be in NWT, it could be in Alberta, it could be in BC, and preferably not offshore. So there's lots of text there. I've simplified this as much as I can for simple reading. But ultimately, my point is that it is technical mineral. It produces a specialty chemical that goes into batteries. It's the active ingredient, needs to be highly pure. But there's lots to build out, and getting to the table to say that we have spodumene, we can mine and create this stuff. Therefore, the next investment partners can come on board and build their refineries. I think it's really important. And if you just go to the next slide, I did make some modifications to that. That could be, so it's all about that bold in the urgency at the bottom. Without the urgent supportive actions to facilitate the exploration activities and sustainable critical mass, along with demonstrating a sustainable extraction of spodumene in NWT, there is a risk that global funding will be directed to alternative sources and regions. And I suppose as a managing director of an exploration company, this is my business. I want this to happen more than most. And if there's anything that the Legislative Assembly can do to support companies like ourselves, it would be most appreciated.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, folks, if that concludes the actual presentation portion, I'll now go to members to see if we have some questions. What I'd like to do is give every member a good chance to ask a good question, perhaps a follow-up, because based on the answer, and then we'll work our way around the room. We'll do one question, one follow-up, and yeah, I'm sure we'll have plenty of time. So the first person who would like to ask a question is Mr. Morris, please.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. So my big first question is, what action are you looking for from us? So what are the missing pieces that you need that you feel the Legislative Assembly could potentially help with?
Thank you, Mr. Morris.
Well,
Mr. Ritchie,
firstly, I think some of what I wanted has already started to happen. Since the new government has been formed, there has been a lot of activity and a lot of awareness. We've had roundtables and lots of questions pointed this way. The big thing is, however you can help with time. There is differences between the provinces in terms of getting approvals. We've gone through a process to already get our drilling permit. But in comparison, it's significantly longer than other provinces, but that's understandable. But we do have a lot more permits and processes that we have to go in order to get to where we want to get to is being ready to construct. So time is definitely one of it. So there's lots of process that we'd like to work on and work out the right level of involvement to make sure that we are streamlined as much as possible without shortcutting any of the necessary processes. The other thing in terms of scope, like we know what we're doing in terms of drilling and how we're going to define this resource. But I have thrown out the idea of is there something that can be done, whether it be to demonstrate how the common ore and how good this ore is in the ground, and how the government and the community and also the companies can work together to demonstrate that we can extract this stuff, we can do it smart, and we can get to the table of a potential future supplier. And I throw out the words like a demonstration plan. It's not an economical plan at all. It'd be something that could demonstrate that we know how to mine this sustainably. We know how to process this, and the product that he's getting can then be moved down to partners downstream, and they can actually see the quality compared to others. So that's in terms of scope. In terms of money, we're capital markets. We don't run on any revenue or any profit. We have access to capital and we continue to do that. But if there's any support that can be done in terms of grants or funding, or even if it's not directly, if it's indirectly, for the Indigenous governments, for training to be prepared and education, that would be mostly appreciated.
Thank you, sir. Any follow-up, Mr. Morris?
No, I think my next questions are kind of related to environment, so I'll let someone else go next, and I'll ask after.
It's good of you. Anybody else? Ms. Morgan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for making the time for this presentation. So you're saying that we need to be as quick as possible because we need to essentially beat Quebec or other jurisdictions in getting enough resources defined that we could get a refinery built on this side of Canada, essentially, I think is what I was hearing you saying. But you're saying that Quebec is already sort of more advanced in defining their resources. What makes you think that we would have a better chance than Quebec in getting a refinery built on this side of the country? Like what? And I guess the sub-question to that is it one or the other? And what happens if Quebec gets a refinery built over there, so it's over for us, or is it one or the other?
Thank you, Ms.
So
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Oh, Mr. Ritchie, sorry. We're not only being recorded, we're also live, and the trick is we can't run too many mics at the same time. I'll let you know, no disrespect, but I'll let you know when you're on. Okay? And that applies to members as well, so don't think you're being treated any differently. So that said, please, if you would, to the member's question.
Not a problem. The forecast in terms of lithium demand is substantial. So it's not so much that one could be built, over in Quebec and then not here. Hopefully there is demand globally to build both, or actually North American demand would be both. So, there's definitely opportunity to build on both regions, and there's potentially opportunity to build multiple in both regions. The reality is that the more we go on, more of this spodumene is being found, and there is substantial other resources like down in Nevada. There's substantial clay deposits, there's brines, there's hard rock down in South America as well. So it's almost, there is a race to be the first funded, and once it's in, then it's kind of taken away from that future demand and that capacity. So it's just that rush against time. Now, will it get to a point where there is enough? Probably. We don't know what the end of this curve is, but I think it's important to increase the awareness that there is spodumene. The size of the deposits and the region could be large enough to support a localized refinery, and that's how we get the economics. Minimizing the transport, it's still a bulk logistics, so we really do want to keep it as close as possible, and that's how you compete. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Okay, I have Ms. Morgan for a follow-up, then I have 3 other members behind her. So don't feel rushed. It's your opportunity.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you confirm that a refinery of this kind, I imagine that it would be pretty energy intense, and that might be a major barrier to establishing such a refinery in the Northwest Territories, given our sort of limitations in our supply of electricity and cost of electricity. Is that the case? And so realistically, how close would you be able to build a refinery to the Northwest Territories?
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Mr. Ritchie, please, if you would. Thank you.
Yeah, so in this slide, and now you've got the latest, you can read some of the details that I've put in there. But the reality is that it is possible in the NWT, but it does need infrastructure. And power, yes, it's about 1/3 power and about 2/3 gas in a typical refinery. Then there is the added complication of having reagents that help break down the rock and bring it to its new form. And it's also a 24-hour operation, and it's quite skilled. It's essentially a big chemistry set. So, and the level of complexity is quite high. As there's hair nets, there's stainless steel, just as an example. So it needs to be. They're typically built in an industrial hub that has similar kind of plants already constructed. So you can already have access to reagents, gas, power, and skilled labour of this type. So it's not a no for NWT, and I don't want to, but it's more likely to be in a industrial hub like down in Edmonton or something like that, and as close as possible. It's still a bulk commodity, this spodumene, although we concentrate it from at least 1 tonne out of the ground, or 4 tonnes out of the ground can go down to say 1, but then we're still moving, a couple of 100,000 tonnes via road or rail to a refinery, and only then it condenses another 1 to 6. So close as possible. So you don't want to go too far away from the NWT, but if you build in the NWT, then lots of things have to come to the NWT in order to support it.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I'm going to work my way around the room, just so members are informed. I have next Mr. McNeely, Mr. Narasu, Ms. Reed, and then we'll go back for another round for everyone. So Mr. McNeely, please, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. And one of the questions that my colleague, Mr. Morris, asked, I was going to ask also, how can we help? But I'll move on to my other question. Is there a is there a cost-sharing agreement with other lithium players in that hidden lake area? We understand there's 15 companies exploring in that area or holding claims in that area. Some of them are a little bit advanced than others. And so the question is a cost-sharing agreement, and has there been any discussion to have a collaborative one voice on behalf of the Lithium group? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNeely. Mr. Ritchie, to his question. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Great question. The answer is yes. So one thing I've been very strong about is that I'm not in competition with anybody in the Northwest Territories in the lithium space. We should be working collaboratively because we need to move to a district scale so Northwest Territories Lithium can actually kick off. My relationship with Lift, who is immediately to the north of us in the Hidden Lake region, is great. Me and Francis were on a call the other day. He has a fantastic team that he's built over there, and I believe we have one as well. And the beauty is we have lots of strong similarities, but we also have some really distinct strengths in different regions. And we are talking a lot about formalising collaboration agreements because there is no reason why my experience from Western Australia in terms of building these plants and understanding these plants should not be shared with everyone and anyone. The mineralogy that we see between our properties from our first kind of collaborative meetings is very similar. And what's going to be worse for the region is if someone builds a plant that doesn't work. So we are working on formalising our agreement and our understanding to work together. And that comes with cost sharing, understanding our impacts for the environment, collaboratively, in terms of cumulative effects, and then also sharing technical data and strategies for infrastructure and also processing plants.
Thank you, sir. Any follow-up, Mr. McNeely, please, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for your positive reply. I'm really glad to hear that you're very much interested in staying here and moving into production. In my area, I've got a oil company, Imperial Oil, that went into production there years ago. So there's years of benefits given to the area in that sector of resource development. And also, I'm quite I'm quite in support in hearing you say responsible development. And I had the opportunity to go to the roundup here last month, and I've met Eileen. It's a small northern territory, so everybody knows Eileen there for decades. So I'm glad she's here on your behalf. And I'm also glad to hear that you're working together with the other players, and there's always the economy of scale in that consortium group. So those are all favorable comments and feedback. So my next question is, are you having positive supports, or have you moved to an MOU for your prospect with the Indigenous groups in the city here in Yellowknife?
Thank you, Mr. McNeely. To the question, Mr. Ritchie, please.
Yeah, so our community engagement, especially with the First Nations, has essentially been our first task. Eileen was the first employee that we took on, and it has been a focus. We have had extensive community engagement. We've had town halls, and to be honest, I'll tell anybody about Lithium when I'm up there, whether it be at the checkout or down the pub. And yes, we have had chief and council meetings with multiple First Nations. We've done traditional knowledge reviews with elders on site, and we are progressing discussions with First Nations around MOUs.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Mr. Narasu.
And yes, in terms of,
sorry, you had a further comment before I go to Mr. Narasu?
oh yeah, sorry, and the support has been great from them. Sorry. Yes, we've been engaging with them, and the support has been great as well. And they're very keen to understand the opportunity.
Thank you for that. Mr. Narasu, you're next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. My question would be related around training and education for possible employment with your company. Has the process of potential training programs have already been initiated in this area? And what kind of prospect of employment that you may have available other than the usual truck drivers? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Narasu. Mr. Ritchie, please.
Yeah, so it's definitely one that we've been focused on, and Eileen is quite passionate about the preparing for lithium mining in the region. From a lithium specific education and training, I don't think there's been enough, and we're quite keen to be a part of that, helping in any which way. I believe that the team that we built has fundamental history and knowledge of what can happen in this region. But in terms of skill sets, in order to do that mine and concentrate, it is very much traditional mining technologies and traditional processing technologies. So that said, that like if there's anyone who has worked in a mine, it would be very similar kind of roles. I suppose probably one of the biggest difference to probably what's been seen up there is it might be a little bit smaller in scale. It is, as I said, it's not large open pit mining. It's very much like a quarry. We need to work out how to mine these dikes from surface, and then once we go underground, it's like essentially mining a vein. And the process of the DMS, which is density media separation, that's likely to be the processing technique that's used. It's used up at Dieback, and it's used for diamonds extensively. And so there's probably more similarities to previous mining companies and mining processes and skills than there are differences. But I think what's always important is that whoever does work on a lithium mine, they understand the broader context of why it's different, or the differences, and where it's going and why it's going there. And that's probably the education that we'd like to be a part of, to pretty much excite and give people the purpose of why we're actually going down this process.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Mr. Narasu, nothing further? Okay. No? Thank you, sir. I have Ms. Reed, and then we can do another round for the other members who'd like to. Ms. Reed, please, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again for your presentation. It was very thorough. I was just hoping and seeking some clarification. You spoke a lot about spodumene, or sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Is it, from your estimation then, from what you were saying, you're saying it's the king of lithium. Is that because it's easier to process? And if that is indeed the case, if I'm understanding correctly, would that be a benefit to expediting the Northwest Territories supply as compared to other supplies here in Canada?
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Mr. Ritchie, please.
Cracking question. You've excited me. So it is the king because there's a number of reasons. Firstly, it has naturally one of the highest lithium contents in a natural form. And when I say that, the lithium, because it's such a small, a very light element, it's still not a lot. It's like in the ground, it's about 1% what they call lithium oxide, which is less than 1% pure lithium element. But that is actually one of the richest forms globally of this natural resource. So firstly, it's got natural high grade. Secondly, it can be mined and processed with known mining techniques. A lot of other sources need a lot of test work, and they're actually forging a new path in terms of processing. Spodumene does not need that. It is well understood, so it gets confidence from the investor market, the partners, and any investors. One of the other biggest benefits is, compared to other lithium resources, you get the ability to split the mine and the refinery. Most other lithium resources, because you can't do a economic enough concentration in the middle, you need to build the entire plant, including refinery, which is a multi-billion-dollar exercise, on location. And we talked about, is NWT the right place for a refinery? Well, in the middle of nowhere is definitely not a right location. So gives it the benefit that we can put the refinery where it's most appropriate in terms of its inputs as well. And then in terms of cost, it competes globally. It's down into the lower quartile. Once they build these other, maybe brines, for example, they can be a little bit lower cost, but they need a lot of surface area because they use sun to evaporate or other technologies. But the reality is that it's cost competitive. The beauty about the Northwest Territories ore is that it's extremely clean. Typically, and I'm getting very technical, I apologize, the spodumene, the pegmatite comes up, it's in between volcanic rocks, typically. Northwest Territories is not between volcanic rocks. It's between a non-volcanic rock, let's put it that way. And that means that there's been less substitution of some of the things that aren't preferred in a spodumene ore like iron. And so when it comes down to mining it and getting the rock, it's actually a lot purer than others. And we're talking, Hidden Lake is very rare in that regard. But it also allows us, because these rocks are very light either side, allows us to mine it more effectively and efficiently. And we can also process it more effectively. And we call these the metasediment host rocks as opposed to metavolcanic. So in my opinion, like I'm very technical with this mineral. I've had to go through a process and bring a plant online that's had a lot of complications in terms of its ore body, but they've got there and they're a fantastic producer. But I see the task ahead being made easy by the geological landscape and what's the resultant mineralogy and the fact that it is spodumene in the right region. So I think if we can move it forward and you can really spell out these advantages, NWT has a extreme cost advantage and would have a desirable feedstock to any refinery.
Thank you for that. Follow Ms. Reed? She's good. I'll move to Mr. Morris and Ms. Morgan thereafter, and we may be running short of time thereafter. After those two members, I have a couple of questions for myself, but I'll certainly weigh in at the very end. Mr. Morris, if you would, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I definitely have a couple that I could ask here, but I'll try and keep it as quick as I can. So, what I'd be interested to know is, do you have, it seems to me that you're fairly early along in exploration. It doesn't look like, have you guys, it doesn't look like you've done drilling. It's been mostly grab samples. If I'm wrong about that, you can maybe correct me in your answer. But what I'm trying to get an idea of is, do you have a pretty good idea of what environmental impacts are going to be and whether you're going to have challenges with relation to that? Do you know what the ARD potential is in the rock? Do you have an idea of where you're going to get water and where it's going to go once it's been used? And I guess I'm just trying to get an idea of, you know, if you have a good idea of if there's going to be challenges in the mining process. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Mr. Ritchie, when you're ready.
Yeah, so we are very early in the process. We have 10 historical drill holes already on this site, which we've used the core to do the met work, etc. But this summer just past is when we did a whole bunch of grab samples and increased the strike length. And now that we have our drill permit, we'll be looking at drilling either in the upcoming, hopefully in the upcoming summer. So yeah, we're still very early on. We are currently doing some further test work. The test work in the past was very much focused on how this thing can be processed. We're doing lots of tests in terms of the host rocks and also and looking for, you know, what would impact us from a mining point of view. So we're very early on that, but we are conducting those tests. In terms of mining concepts as well, we want to do this right. So we're having a bit of a sustainable lens on it. We're thinking about things like progressive reclamation. I think the style that would.
Okay. Folks who are following along, we seem to have a glitch in this machine. So if we could be patient for a moment. It appears we might have Mr. Ritchie might be back.
Okay.
Okay, you're back now. We lost you about, say, 1 minute back. I forgot what you said, though.
Okay.
Progressive.
Progressive reclamation. Oh, you didn't miss much. Okay. Yeah, so we think there's some great concepts with underground mining and also progressive reclamation for open cut, which are actually small, more like trenches and quarry style. Yeah, so, and then also, yeah, so we're doing a bunch of test work. We don't know. Yes, we've looked at the land in terms of its impact, but we would be very keen to do that sustainably. We think it's a great location to reclaim, do it progressively. There's underground options as well. There's water available. We haven't gone deep into long-term sources and what would happen to that, but it's definitely a part of our thinking. So very early stages. The next step for us really is to start defining the resource and coming up with concepts to do this sustainably.
Thank you for that. Mr. Morris, anything further?
Thank you. And last question. So you mentioned that there's a significant cost advantage to what we have in the NWT based on the quality of the resource. I guess my question back is, does that cost advantage exist with the current operating climate in the NWT, knowing that, you know, you likely have to be generating power using diesel? Is that what you're considering when you say there's a cost advantage, or would something significant need to change in order for that cost advantage to exist?
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Mr. Ritchie, please.
So, yeah, sorry. So the power always comes up. So one of the beauties about the ore is that when we actually concentrate it, we're doing it at a rock size at circa 1 centimetre. So the amount of energy that needs to go into the mining and the concentration process is not as much as some that might have to go down to microns in order to liberate their spodumene. So that means that the power requirement on a mine that we have visualised out there is not significant. Building overhead power lines and doing large power infrastructure, in my opinion, to start off with, is not necessary. I think we can come up with microgrids that have renewable penetration that can help offset diesel. but ultimately the power consumption is not a big part of the basic mine and concentrate process. Now, if we start talking about electric fleet in terms of mining, then the demand can increase. But so I think a lot of the spodumene mines that will be coming on will initially have those kind of cost hurdles. Where the benefit comes from, and I know that the Northwest can have a premium in terms of some costs, but there is, when you compare to when you're finding this stuff, it's never inside a city, and if it is, then it's never going to be mined. So in terms of a remoteness, I don't see the Hidden Lake project as actually being that remote. It's on a highway, 65 k's from a capital city of 20,000 people that has, in a mining jurisdiction. So I think the cost benefits of its geology, I think, will be realised.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Ms. Morgan, and then I'll go to Mr. McNeely, and then I'll squeeze in a couple of questions, and we'll bring us to the end. Okay, unless, of course, any member has anything burning that they need to ensure that gets on the record. We want to take the opportunity while we have you. Thank you. So, Ms. Morgan, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of your slides mentioned that for a refinery to be economical, it would need at least 4 sources. I'm not sure if I wrote that down right. I think it was in a chart in one of the slides. I don't know if you can find that, Katie. But can you clarify whether you envisioned there would be 4 sources available, like in the Hidden Lake deposits, or 4 sources available from different parts of the Northwest Territories, or if there's not enough sources in the Northwest Territories, where else nearby on this side of Canada do you envision would supply this refinery to make it economic?
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Mr. Ritchie, please.
Yeah, so it's not 4 sources. That was, if we're going to build a train, if we're going to build a refinery, typically they build it in 4 processes. So they design it to have 4 processing trains, we call them. So, and why they do that is because there is a whole bunch of common infrastructure that gets built, and they need to justify that big common infrastructure. So they start with 1 processing train, which has a calciner and a crystallizer, et cetera, and then what they do is they just build another one of those to use.
Okay. Oh. Did we lose you? It's a competitor.
Building, we need to be thinking.
Oh, we lost you. Now
Have I frozen?
You've frozen. Oh.
Am I back?
You're back now. Yes.
Okay. I don't know if it's my internet or others, but yeah. So it's really when they're looking at building a refinery, and it's a very general statement, but the majors will be looking at trying to make sure that they build it of a scale, and the traditional refinery at least have 4 trains. In terms of supplies, as long as we get to that critical mass that could supply those 4 trains over the lifetime of the capital investment, then we're fine. So that could be only 1 or 2 resources in the Northwest or surrounding region. So I believe that the Northwest Territories does have enough. It's just that some of it needs to start off with the stuff that's close to existing infrastructure so we can get going quicker and with less capital cost. And then there needs to be a pathway or a vision of how to bring more up in order to satisfy the long-term build of a refinery downstream.
Thank you for that, Ms. Morgan.
Go on to the next one.
Thank you. Working towards the end of question period, Mr. McNeely, if you want to bring us home for the member side.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make it quick so you can have your questions in there. My last question, I have many, but for the purposes of this discussion, looking at the back end of the cost of refining and processing, the cost on refining, is it cost beneficial to the Northwest Territories for the spodumene coring rather than refining?
you, sir. Yeah, thank you. Mr. Ritchie.
So just to understand the question, is it cost beneficial just to do the mining and concentrating as opposed to all of it? Is it?
I'll go back to the member just to make sure that the question he's looking for gets asked properly. So give me 1 second. Mr. McNeely, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, my question is, this phase here, you had mentioned the Spuddamay here, excavation, processing, coring, rather than outside of refining. I'm just trying to get an idea, overall in 20 years, what would be beneficial for the Northwest Territories? Excavation of Fudding, Spuddamay, or refining. I know refining could be a cost-shared arrangement with other players to make it economical, but I asked that question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks for your clarification. Mr. Ritchie, if you would, please.
Yeah, so let's start with early exploration. So if we, maybe the slide before, the whole readiness in terms of exploration, test work, and moving down into all the studies, unfortunately, there's minimal work that needs to be done except for the drilling on site. After we do that drilling, we do lots of studies, there's lots of paperwork in order to justify moving forward into construction. Once we go into construction of a mine and a concentrator, then the benefits start to flow. There is opportunity in the readiness stage. We've already had opportunities for First Nations in supporting us with field work and etc. And our TK studies. But really the opportunities start once we start constructing. Now, there is that kind of operation is essentially mining and concentrating. You know, there's hundreds of jobs opportunities just in that phase alone. The refinery does come with additional capital construction and jobs as well, and would be beneficial, but it really needs to be considered in its complexities of operation and whether it's the right place to do. But as you go along the path of readiness through to operations, the opportunities increase just for the mine and concentrate. And as you go through from the mining concentration and also the refinery, there's more and more opportunities, more and more you keep inside the NWT.
Thank you, sir. Anything further, Mr. McNeely?
Thanks.
Folks, before I ask any questions, does anyone have any burning ones left on the table? No, we have them in this context. I would rather us not miss the opportunity by extending a minute or two. So, Mr. Morris, if you had a burning question?
Everyone, I'll go.
It's very kind of you. Mr. Ritchie, I just have a couple. Some of them may be more complicated than others. Some may be simpler than others, I guess, in some ways of looking at it. You've sort of answered some of the questions I had, but I just wanted to hammer it out a little clearer. Barriers. What barriers, challenges, and obstacles are you seeing currently now to proceed to your next phase? Is that an easy question to answer, or is it a clear question in the sense of saying it's X, Y, Z, or is it a multitude of many factors? Mr. Ritchie, if you would help us, please.
Yeah, so maybe in a broader context, the lithium market is currently a little bit suppressed, and that comes to my point about the urgency. So about 9 months ago, the price of spodumene was at record highs, and that kind of price stimulus kicked off a whole bunch of actions around the world. For entrepreneurs like me and mining background, you know, it was find more spodumene. Spodumene is the quickest to the market, and it's needed in North America where the demand is growing. But for over in China, where they dominate the refining processes globally, they actually said, well, spodumene's extremely expensive. Where else can we get lithium from? And they've gone and sourced locally and also from other countries like Africa, an inferior product called lepidolite. And you know, they've run off and they've done this very effective way of actually controlling the lithium market by finding another source of it that's extremely expensive, at least double the cost of what spodumene processing does. But when the prices were so high, it was still profitable. But they've been able to get the market back under control. But right now, So much so that it's actually gone into suppression. We're about down, it's almost a 90% retraction in terms of lithium price. So my number one problem right now is that the lithium market is suppressed, which for me means that it's very hard to progressively continue to spend money when share prices are suppressed and the appetite for investors in terms of getting more capital into the company has reduced / dried up to some degree. So that's my number one concern. But what I like about this is that lithium is extremely cheap. Now, EVs will start to get cheaper, the adoption will start to grow, the demand will pick up. So it's kind of necessary in a cycle of a growth pattern because I believe long term that the lithium is going to be there. So my number one problem is we're in a suppressed market, can't move as fast possibly. However, this is the time to move fast. Thinking long and not being so reactive to these market fluctuations with the support of government and community to say, you know, we're committed to bringing this on and how can we do it either more cost effectively or, to get through these busts. So we don't lose momentum in terms of exploring and understanding what the potential is here is probably my number one thing that I think about, and hence these discussions, collaboration agreements and discussions with people like Lyft, talk to major strategic investors and strategic partners that are looking at doing refineries. How can we kind of give them more confidence without going through maybe some of the processes that they expecting? Because regardless of the investment appetite at the moment, the reality is long-term lithium is needed. And regions like NWT should play a part in this. Hopefully that answers a portion of your question.
No, it was fine. It was perfect. I'm just, from your perspective, that's the information I'm looking for. A couple well, I wouldn't say easier, but certainly other types of questions. Now, you've mentioned some community engagement, and you've hired Ms. Marlowe, who's certainly a star in her community and her territory, so by any means. Can you maybe explain your, I'll call it, say, your either formal or informal agreement with the community organizations? We've used the term SIA, which stands for Socioeconomic Agreements, and other people use different phrases or whatnot, but what type of agreements have you engaged in and maybe got moving forward with the local Indigenous groups? Because I'd like to hear that they've been part of something, and are they part of the future as well? Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose the right answer is that we're still early stage in terms of working out those terms of what that would look like. So nothing has been formalised, and it's not by the lack of want on our side. There's obviously been a complicated last 6 months with fires, etc. So we're working with them on what that looks like, and we're very connected to their construction arm as well. But yeah, no formal agreements yet, and possibly even the terms of what we're negotiating are probably confidential as well.
Oh, by no means I was asking for confidential information. I'm more concerned about your engagement and how it's working out, and are you coming together, those types of contact. I think you pretty much answered the question. Doing a project like this without their support, I mean, it either becomes unsuccessful or miserable. So one or the other. My last question, unless any other members really need to jump in, I think most of it's been answered, but you did highlight defining the resource, and I understand that from an industry point of view, resources have to be defined to basically help decide, are you really moving forward, and how, based on economics. And, that also sets the tone of the work you want to put into the permitting, back to the relationships, investment, et cetera. So that being said, how far out is that type of work and the initiative on this project? Can you, if you can't speak to specifics because of the confidential, at least can you give us some sense as to what we'll see in the future and what that could mean in the sense of potential jobs and opportunities? Thank you.
Well, the answer is due to the lithium market right now, the time is a little bit questionable. When the market recovers and we get confidence that, the market is saying, go for it, then the thing could be defined in, less than 12 months. Lyft is a good example. They've been drilling for over 12 months now. And they're working on a sizable and multiple sites, and they should be coming up to some kind of resource defined in the next 6 to 12 months. So it really is. We don't have a start date yet, a confident start date of when we're going to aggressively go straight to definition. We do have confidence over any other types of minerals. The fact that it's outcropping for 3.25 kilometres, and we see that Lift has every drill hole they do is just confirming extension at depth, and our historical holes say exactly the same as well. So we give a very good confidence level in terms of what could be there, but we don't have a definitive date or budget to progress or actively or aggressively explore to a definition stage at this stage. Yeah, and I think the market's going to define that, to be honest.
No, that's fine. Thank you. That worked. I'm going to go to Mr. Morris. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, one more. Just wanted to follow up on the point you made about price. I guess I'd just like you to kind of expand on that a little bit more. I mean, I fully understand what you mean about the price being where it is now, but I'm kind of wondering, do you have any idea what kind of market volatility you're going to be dealing with long term? And how big of a risk is that for a project like this? And what are the factors creating that volatility or certainty either way that you're seeing long term?
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Mr. Ritchie, if you would, please.
Yeah, emerging markets always have ups and downs, but generally they head north, a trend north. There's lots of data around the long-term price of spodumene, and I'm confident that that's quite conservative. I think the biggest factor that's going to define long-term lithium prices is the cost of the alternative that I explained that's getting processed in China at the moment, and the fact that that is circa $2,000 plus US dollars a ton. And I believe that an active mine in the NWT at Hidden Lake could easily be producing at a good profit margin at that. Even if the price is a little bit lower than that, it would still be profitable. So, we have insight with large broking houses and analysts giving us guidance. I have understanding of the basic cost that would come with operating a mine and transporting this stuff to various locations. And we think we would be economical under long-term pricing and definitely competitive against lepidolite, which at this stage is the #1 competitor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it looks like we've come to an end of the presentation, so maybe what I'll do is say first, thank you very much for your presentation. It's been very helpful. I'm sure members may have more questions in the sense that if we wish to follow up on anything specific that we can't figure out on our own, we'll certainly write the whole group. That said, I'd also like to request the reverse. If you have any questions of us, please feel free to send us a letter. I will speak on behalf of the committee and say if there are any milestones you wish to update us upon, that would be certainly grateful. It'd be nice to know how the project's proceeding, maybe even some of the challenges that you're facing. As you proceed, your project is of great interest, not just to us, but everyone in the Northwest Territories, obviously, because it is an exciting investment and opportunity, both in our economy, but into our people as well. So that said, I wish to thank all our witnesses today, and I believe that now brings us to a close of the public briefing on lithium mining, and I formally want to thank Loyal Lithium for your time and your energy. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.